Hello and welcome to another Wednesday morning adult coloring jam. This past week I looked into, the boom and bust of adult coloring. That was kind of a few years ago trend of a lot of publications and sales of adult coloring books. But of course, before that, adult coloring had been around for a long time with items like anatomy study. I have this yoga anatomy coloring book that is, very text heavy and also has things to color for practice and study. Even back into the Middle Ages, something like a coloring book was used for practice of artists that would actually do the paintings for the masters in their apprenticeships. So that's something interesting to share with you. And today I'm going to do a mandala from the Shakti coloring book. But as I'm doing that, I'm going to read to you a little bit from the book. In this book, each page has on the back of it some text that goes along with the image that you will be coloring. So I find that really nice. And I think actually, uh, since I opened to it, the page I want to color today is this one. This is the one that I opened to, and I quite like the similarity to Celtic knot design. And so this one is called the Festival of Lights Kolam. She is the power of enjoyment, the tree of plenty, the wish-fulfilling gem. From Sita Upanishad. My dog is moving around in the background. She'll just get up on the couch probably. So let me read from this book here, the Shakti coloring book, the text for this plate. Throughout India, common people make intricate patterns on the thresholds of their homes or on the ground at festival sites to welcome guests. These patterns have many names, such as kolam, rangoli, alpana, or mandana, depending on which region in India they are found. Historically, the patterns and color combinations from each culture were distinctive because they were based in the native materials available. As commercial powdered pigments became available, these regional variations grew less distinct. There is a general division between those patterns that are made freehand and those composed over an underlying grid of dots. So let me talk about, there's some more information. It may not be of interest to everyone. You can purchase the book if you want to read more. But I will talk about the colors. Traditional kolams are made of rice flour, so their lines are white. But when modern powdered pigments are utilized, brilliant colors are often used instead. While for yantras and mandalas, there are rules limiting what colors may be used and in what combinations. There are no such rules for kolams. The only rule is the final artwork should be beautiful. Contemplation. Artists celebrate freedom, but often forget that ultimate freedom includes both spontaneity and discipline. An auspicious way to discipline ourselves is to be loyal to a cause, principle, or duty larger than ourselves. Like a vow, our loyalty to protect us from impulsive behavior and temptation, giving us freedom from distraction. Most devotional artists are loyal to their teacher or their lineage to which they belong, making art in that style for their entire lives. Who or what we are loyal to, beyond time and preferences, even when our loyalty is not earned or returned. What is worth dying for? Well, that's an interesting text and message for this page. And as I have in the past, I'll turn the camera down to you there. And so this is live streaming as I'm coloring that. And I think I may be able to open this other page while I am recording. Hopefully that is still working for you. Wonderful. Okay. So then one thing that I wanted to talk about, and the reading from this work that I chose to turn to, is also kind of in line with the idea of yamas and niyamas, which in the Ashtanga or Eightfold Path of yoga are kind of the first rungs, even before the asana or physical practice, on the yoga path to your complete realization, your self actualization. And in the traditional yoga, that is through, like I said, the Eightfold Path. The yamas and niyamas are similar to the 10 Commandments. Yamas are in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. They list the 5 yamas, which are moral restraints, and they apply specifically to how you behave outwardly to other beings. And then following that are the niyamas, which are Patanjali as Yoga Sutra's 5 niyamas are observances which apply specifically to how you conduct yourself on a more personal level. Of course, with the yoga practice being ultimately withdrawing senses and into a meditation state. So that isn't necessarily how we are practicing that in our modern times. I wonder who's sending me a message. Oh, that's not relevant to this at all. So yeah, as I was saying, when the traditional style of yoga, these Eightfold Path, the Ashtanga yoga, that we bring our asana or physical practice that we have in our fitness centers from, that third step. We have the yamas. The niyamas are 2 of the 8 steps, and then we have a physical practice that follows that. And that physical practice is not always, we don't always talk about the yamas and niyamas in our Western society because, they are kind of in line with the Christian or, Judeo-Christian 10 Commandments, in that, some of them are congruous and some of them are a bit separate, but, you can talk about your internal and external self through these observances that we have here, and that ultimately the commandments of the Bible are observances that even in that very early story were not observed by the followers when they had their observance of the golden calf on the way from taking those tablets in that biblical story. So anyway, in the Hindu tradition, in the Ashtanga yamas from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha. So these yamas, obviously, it's difficult for me to pronounce them because I'm not, native. I don't know. Sanskrit's kind of a dead language. It's a root of many. It's kind of Proto-Indo-European language, I think, is what they call it when you talk about Sanskrit, where it comes from, and it's not really used. I think people will speak Indian. I don't know what the dialects or what the names of those languages are. But I apologize for mispronunciation if people are actively speaking that. I am a Western practitioner and teacher of the yoga in the Ashtanga tradition. And of course, I have a basis with the flow of the physical asana practice. And in paint yoga, I'm trying to bring that exercise, physical exercise of course, creating this work, and also mental exercise, singular focus on your work as you're doing it. Let me go into each of those yamas individually. First, even Western medicine, of course, the first thing that Western medical practitioners vow in their Hippocratic oath is to do no harm. And that's the basis, the very first foundational yama. And that Eastern understanding of, the nonviolence, the doing no harm, can be much more deep and subtle than just the prima facie language of to do no harm. And I think Gandhi had also said to even go as to not offending, even in his envisionment of ahimsa. And so that is when you establish ahimsa, others will stop harming you as well. So that's the basis of the nonviolent passive resistance. When you are actively seeking nonviolence and actively seeking to make your voice heard in a nonviolent way, the commitment to non-harming, according to the belief system, brings that non-harming back to you. And of course, it's difficult in our modern times to necessarily see that, but we can be heartened when when we do see that eventually come back, sometimes not even in our own lifetime. Sometimes the struggle, as we've seen with our struggle of racism in the United States through the institution of slavery, through continuing that in Jim Crow, and all of the the violences that we've portrayed onto people of color through our systems in the United States. That's just something that people over generations have been protesting in both violent and nonviolent forms. And so that's not something that's solved immediately. But anyway, that brings us to the yama of truthfulness, satya. And there's a filter when you use the acronym THINK, or think before you speak. You put your words that you are going to speak through the filter of time and thoughtfulness. When you take the time to ask yourself before you speak words if they are true before anything else. And then the remaining part of this acronym think is, of course, is it true? And then is it helpful? Is it inspirational? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And by bringing your language through the time of your thoughtfulness, through this filter, then your language also can be truthful and maintain the non-harming yama as well. So these yamas are built on top of each other in a way that you can't practice the truthfulness without also being mindful of non-harming, because even if you have something that is truthful, saying it in a way that is accusatory, or that puts off the listener, that they don't hear the message, which so you have to craft your message through these filters, and then it's better able to be heard and acted upon by your target. The person you want to hear the message needs to hear it in a way that is helpful to them. And even if it's true, if you say it in a harmful way, that can definitely make it more difficult for the person to comply with what you hope for them through your communication. Then, of course, there's non-stealing, asteya. That's not taking what you haven't earned. In any kinds of things, not just stealing from a store, but taking advantage of people's time, taking advantage of things that aren't meant for you. Often things are offered for free, um, in a way to make it accessible to people. But if you have the means, you should not necessarily take those things that are meant to be free for the less fortunate. So even though they are freely given, taking them if you have the means to get it through paying for yourself is um, not stealing again, but that would fall under this yama. Um, and then I wanted to talk about the fourth yama, brahmacharya moderation, which is sexual moderation. And this is, mainly in the yoga tradition, of course, and monks and things, in a religious setting, this would refer to celibacy and not having any contact with the sexual um, realm. But also, we are living in our worlds, and we have families, and we have partners, and so the main point of this is to be moderate and respectful to your partner. So this would go into not committing adultery, not coveting another person's partner, and that sort of thing. Um, if you're trying to make a corollary to the Ten Commandments in a biblical religious setting. So then the last of the yamas is parigraha, or non-hoarding, and that kind of gets to me into this modern kind of movement to minimalism, reducing your clutter, keeping only what you actually need, eschewing things in exchange for experiences. And so that's an idea of acting towards outwardly things that removes your senses from them, and that brings you into the ability, again, in the tradition of removing your senses and coming to the complete realization of meditation, which in the traditional path to complete realization is actually for coming to complete realization after the withdrawal of your senses from external objects, concentration on a singular focus, and then into the meditation to complete realization, which is in the tradition not an active state, but in our modern world, we can turn that back into practice that expresses ourself. And as we relate that back to our activity of coloring here, um, through the singular concentration on just doing this one thing at a time, removing your senses from all of the distractions of planning and preparing for your busy lives and your busy day, this activity in and of itself can give you a recharge and reset similar to sleeping, because you have everything sort of laid out for you already, and you have very limited places to go. Taking the time to stay within your limitations, staying in your lines, staying with the rules and limitations of the practice. As I mentioned in mandalas, now I have not been staying with that in other mandalas that I've colored, but there are specific rules about which colors are used and which order and which direction even of your strokes when creating sacred space with a mandala. And with this practice that I'm doing now, I am not paying attention to traditional colors, and I am not paying attention to rules, and I am not staying in the lines. And there is value to both. So moderation, even in moderation. And, so with that, I'm feeling somewhat complete with my drawing, and I'm feeling somewhat complete with my video and interaction with you today. And I thank you for your time and coming to join me for another weekly session of live adult coloring jam. And I'm not sure if anybody's commented on this while I've been doing it. I don't see any comments now, but if you are watching this after I've created it, I hope you will leave a comment, contact me for questions, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.